County Conversation podcast is sponsored by Daffabet, the world's leading online betting site. To find out more, visit daffabet.com. It's the County Conversation, the show where we take the three most interesting stories from the last week of county cricket and give you the inside track to them here. I'm Cameron Ponsonby.
I'm Nick Friend.
3 in a row, Nick.
Four in a row. To the point that I wasn't even going to mention it.
I know.
We could do our names.
It's a running theme. I like it. I enjoy it. We're all back in the UK. We all feel warm and fuzzy. It's kind of raining outside, but that's okay. Our three topics this week: declining crowds in the Blast. James Anderson is back with white ball in hand, and the England Lions draw a high-scoring ball fest. That's my words, not anyone else's. Against India A. But what did we learn from it? What did we learn? Also, as a little bonus extra fourth-ish topic, we've just gone past June the 1st. I mean, the cricket transfer window is open.
Slammed open.
Slammed open. Slammed shots, flung open. Anyway, Nick, let's get into the Blast stuff because I think this is speaks to a kind of wider topic within the sport. So I saw your stats on this where 16 out of 18 counties reported declining Blast ticket sales compared to, in 2024 compared to 2023 for last season. And also got these quite kind of bad news numbers from George Sims' piece in The Observer that since 2019, county cricket has lost 222,000 fans across the three formats. Blast ticket sales are down 18%. Middlesex from 2019 to 2024 are down 40%. They sold over 100,000 in 2019. That's down to 64,000 in 2024. And Lancashire's Blast attendances in that same period of time have halved from about 10,000 to 5,000. Nick, this is bad. Why is this happening? Is it simply a case of, there's a new show in town. It's called The 100. What do you expect?
It's not good. And having been at Lord's on the opening night of the Blast last Thursday, on a day that, I thought that was a day that really spoke to where the Blast now sits. It was played in the evening. The Blast opener was played in the evening of an ODI, the first ODI of the summer, men's ODI. England men scored 400. And while the West Indies were batting, Middlesex were losing the toss, were winning the toss against Sussex and getting out to bowl untelevised. I know the Lancashire game was later televised against Worcestershire, but I suppose just the way it snuck up on you as a consumer, being around, living in London, you might have seen them, but there's very occasional adverts knocking around on the tube for Middlesex and Surrey Blast games, but by and large, I suppose it also speaks to the schedule and how packed everything is. Like, it does feel like it's just creeping up on you a bit, doesn't it? Even even Kane Williamson's arrival, and he arrived on last Monday, and there's a press conference last Wednesday at Lord's, and even turning up to that, it was something quite surreal. It's surreal because it's Kane Williamson, but also surreal because there are only a couple of people there are only a couple of journalists in the room because it clashed with the day before an ODI, and also didn't have the same razzmatazz that maybe Peak Blast had, and Peak Blast is the years you and I both remember probably from going to Lord's and the Oval in 18, 19. And genuinely, it was certainly Lord's. I remember the Thursday nights were a sellout, and you got. I mean, it's one. Those numbers are one thing, but there's 17,000 drop off between Middlesex v Surrey in 2017 and Middlesex v Sussex in 2024.
I've got
to speak.
No, I am. I was just warming up. I was getting my thoughts in order. I've got a counterpoint that I want to put to you to play slightly devil's advocate, but I do wonder if I believe this. So, this is my interpretation of kind of the numbers presented in the Observer. 222,000 fewer tickets sold in 2014 compared to 2019. But in the 2024 100 alone, that competition sold 540,000 tickets. So that is back of a fag packet maths, 300,000 more tickets being sold in cricket as a result of the 100 being played. Is that not a net positive? Isn't it not does it not speak to the greater good, as it were, if 300,000 more people are watching cricket over the course of the summer, and the downside of that is oh no, Middlesex have 10,000 in rather than
No,
20,000.
no, you know, face value, yes, good thing. But we're talking about if we're talking about the blast itself, it is inarguable that I think the point that I spoke to a lot of people in the last couple of days about this, just basically people around working around the counters, around the game, who are directly involved in trying to sell blast tickets. And point one person made to me, and I get this, and I should say for a long time I was of the view that the biggest cause of drop offs in blast tickets were not 100 sale was not the 100, but was the pandemic and post pandemic work culture and if we go back to those peak days, particularly in London, the blast was sold as the big pub after work, right? You'd
Yeah,
go from work, you'd go from the office. Trouble is, if you're not in the office, you're not in your groups, you're not taking these big work parties, and look, that has absolutely played an enormous part. Um, you know, Post pandemic work culture has also coincided with cost of living stuff. £38 for Middlesex v Kent this coming Thursday at Lords to watch
yeah,
a T20 game is,
it's a lot of
with
money.
or without the hundreds, with or without being undercut by the competitions, that is too expensive. But also, because of cost of living, because of the price of everything, frankly, it costs a lot of money to put these games on. Where I have changed my mind slightly in the last couple of days from talking to people is that my view at the time, my view previously, and maybe slightly naively, was that the 100 coincided with the pandemic, and therefore we'd look at everything, cricket looks at everything in through the 100 lens. I was looking at it more through the pandemic lens. I think, but also I looked at the 100 as a more indirect cause. But actually, the reality is, for all the marketing spiel around a new audience, the 100 is still the 100 and the blast are still fundamentally relying on the same core audience, and
Yeah,
that is I think the issue. You can't because those numbers you give there about 100 sales or 100 spectators, they are not 500 plus thousand new cricket fans. The
yeah,
vast majority are still your existing cricket fans. The people someone described them to me as your twice a yearers. So your twice a year is your people who are going to go to 2 games a year because that's what they do. Two T20 games a year in the evenings, have a few drinks with a few mates. But if your twice a year is realise there is something cheaper with more high profile names with better marketing
yeah,
going on, and also at a more preferable time of year, during the summer holidays. The blast hasn't been in the summer holidays since 2019, and that peak era we talk about, 17 to 19, is what I would call like the Barclays era almost of the blast. That was a July comp that started the second week of July, ended in September, encapsulated the summer holiday periods, and so it all. I suppose what I'm trying to say is it all adds up, and I
yeah.
don't want to feel like don't want to feel like we're sat here on a county podcast, sort of like dumping on the competition, particularly competition that I think we both really enjoy and have really enjoyed. But I did find it sad on Thursday looking over at even at Lords where 10,500 people. Don't get me wrong, is a lot of people, and it's still a lot of people that frankly you know plenty of English football matches. That is a big old crowd, but with a ground like Lords, we've seen it packed on those nights. That was that they were only using half the stadium, and that is undoubtedly a shame. There is some good news. There are some positive news stories. There were, Gloucestershire and Essex rose in ticket sales last year. Leicestershire were up on last year's opener this year. I know that other counties are some other counties are in the same boat. But equally, Blast Off, which I think is bizarre, having 2 days after the start of the competition anyway. Blast Off at Edgbaston looked almost empty, and Edgbaston is the ground we most associate with the Blast. So to see this sort of launch event happening 2 days after the competition started, you don't go 3, 2, 1, launch a rocket, and once it's in the middle of space, go blast off, do you? Like, if you're going to use the phrase, you've got to do it
Be
properly,
first.
and it was all a bit knockoff. I
I think
thought.
I think something I found interesting. I saw a tweet from Joey Durso, who I believe looks like the New York Times now. We need to check that. He used to be at the Athletic. He's a very, very good journalist, and he shared a thing about basically the playoff final for the National League having 52,000 people there, and he basically said we are living through a golden age of English football. 52,000 people for a fifth tier match. The boom is remarkable, new, and unique to England, possibly Germany. And basically the point he was making was that many people predicted that the Premier League would basically kill lower league football, but the opposite happened. And the idea that it complements rather than substitutes, it presents a new high-profile version of the product, and that trickles down, in effect, to other elements of the game. And I've kind of been thinking about it over the last kind of 24 hours. So at first I was like, well, why couldn't that happen with cricket? Why couldn't that happen with the 100? And why couldn't Blast benefit from that 100 competition being in place and seeing the trickle down effect in the tickets thing? Not quite how to speak. But then I think a very simple reason why it probably struggles to have that knock on effect is the 100 doesn't knock onto anything. It knocks into the end of the season. So say, for instance, if the summer holidays were in June or May, and that's when the 100 was played, and then the Blast came afterwards, you might get a knock-on effect of people going to the 100, going to the Blast. But if anyone, I've always found this really bizarre about the 100, and then it's not just related to the Blast, it's about just cricket in general, is that our flagship competition to get kids involved in the sport and go, what do you think of this, ends on August the 31st, and on September the 1st, the whole country goes, it's football time.
And the kids go back to school, and the cricket
Kids
that's
go back to
left.
school. So there's no school cricket at school.
And the cricket that's left, of course, is for the rest of that season is cricket that's played through the daytime in the championship.
Yeah.
So, what I would say though is the one T20, the one bit of T20 cricket that is played in September, and this is where, I'd caveat all of what I was saying about, I call it sad beforehand. Like, Blast Finals Day is still the best day in the calendar, in my opinion, domestically. I love it. It's sold out in October, November the year before. It has this cult following, and I suppose it is the best of all of the bits that are clinging on, on one particular day. And last year you had a great story in an unfancied team winning it for the first time, and you kind of got that semi-guarantee with Finals Day. They're going to get a great day, and people are going to end the season and go, God, what a great competition. But the reality is also that it's it's competing. They are competing competitions. That the Blast 100 they can't not be, because you're offering by and large the same product, right? And not competing as in they're not actively competing, but they are, I suppose. But people will weigh them up against each other. And the other thing I'd say is, just linked to that point, is I do wonder. This goes back to the pandemic stuff slightly. I do wonder whether I'd be interested. I could have this completely wrong, but the sense I get sometimes is that maybe some counties still operating in a pre-pandemic world and the way they try and sell these things. I don't quite understand, for example, why Middlesex is still so keen on Thursday nights for their games when what we're seeing is attendances fall through the floor from where they were 2018, 2019 for those evenings. Likewise, I don't think Friday night is the same. It's still probably the best night of the week, but I don't think it's anywhere near the same level of importance perhaps as it was 5-6 years ago, if that makes sense.
I don't know. Thursday's still, if people are going into the office, going to be Thursday, Friday. You can't say there's a better night to have something than a Friday night.
No. Sorry. It's my broader point would be, I wonder whether more innovation could be tried around how you sell your games.
Yeah,
because
I
don't know the marketing guys may well turn around and say that this is you're talking nonsense. We've been trying new stuff every year, and I'm sure they have. Of course they have, because that's the job. But do we still look at the lens? I guess do we, and does everyone still look at the Blast through those sort of, how do you say that word? Halcyon.
Halcyon. Yeah.
Halcyon.
Jesus Christ, I got scared there.
Do we all still look at the Blast through his halcyon perfect years of 17 to 19, when it was the hottest ticket in town? The reality is it isn't. Yeah. And when, it's not going to be, is it? With, and it's not going to change now that the 100 is established and there's more money coming into it and all these things. It's only going to become less blue ribboned than it already is, if that makes sense. Whether that's a problem, I don't know, because I still think the Blast fulfills a great purpose and is a great competition in its own right. I think it'd be a far better competition if the Finals Day was in July and it was all packaged up as a single competition. And then actually, we talk about the lack of not continuity, but the lack of narrative, I suppose, attached to post 100, it's pretty similar to the Blast, isn't it? You could really help the Blast as a product in terms of and its role within the 100 if the whole comp was played out. Then your wildcards happen, and they're based on who's won the competition, and also that that everyone's played T20 cricket. Think from a scheduling perspective, you could play the whole Blast through to July, the end of July. Those extra Champo games then get pushed back into late August, September. There's 2 rounds you play in late July anyway. That goes from 3 to 5 Champo games, and the whole thing has a bit less jumping around. Blast is played in the whole block, 100's played in the block, and then your 2 Champo blocks basically at the start and the end. People won't like that, but it does at least give narrative to. And I know this is a big thing, a thing that you're big on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just think if I was to wave my magic wand, I'd immediately move finals day back towards just the end of the competition. It's bonkers. You want to talk about having engaging casual fans, give them a chance to understand what they're following, and B, just too many. It's too many group stage games. You need to have some element of jeopardy to attract people to want to watch it. And
if you can lose 7 times, if you lose 7 times in the group stage of the 100, you've lost every game. If you lose 7 games in the group stage of the Blast, Gloucestershire win the competition.
Right, time for an ad break.
The Cricketers' award-winning team brings our subscribers news, features and insight on county and international cricket every single day. You can try us now by signing up for £1. Yes, you heard that correctly, just £1 at thecricketer.com/digital.
James Anderson is back in the Vitality Blast with white ball in hand, his first T20 in over a decade, and he recorded his best figures ever in the format, 4 overs, 3 for 17 against Durham. Nick, you know what? I reckon I'm the Grinch here with this, because I think there's a lot of loving, there's a lot of joy to see England's greatest ever bowler back with ball in hand. And I went and I watched the highlights, and I was expecting to see the ball swinging around corners, and it just went straight. And I don't understand how Durham faced the lad bowling 78 mile an hour and gone at 4s. Can you talk me round so I can be a bit more? Can I be a little bit less miserable?
I'm broadly with you. I was. He beat the bat a few times, and he was hit for 6 and a 4 when he went for 17 and 4 overs. He's obviously bowled very well. However, it's hard not to be underwhelmed because everyone's image of James Anderson bowling is hooping this new ball round corners, right? And we watched him have 3 guys just loop leading edges to fielders in the ring. And it almost feels a bit dirty, doesn't it? It's like that is like and I think also, and I don't know if this is part of it, but because of the stuff last year with 100 balls, I think I was ready to see, and how much they were swinging and how, and how actually it meant Jimmy could play till he was 65 because he'll still be swinging it at 65. And if these 100 balls, if they're not solved, it'll still be swinging. And just kind of watched it being like, I really hope, this looks like what it does in my head. And yeah, like you, I watched, I was like, this is like fair play. The stats were lovely. He's taken 7 T20 wickets since Steven Gerrard slipped. And that was my first year at university. Dale Benkenstein was, I think, his penultimate was, I think before his return here, I think Dale Benkenstein was like his fifth last T20 wicket, and he's just been sacked as the coach, which shows how much time has passed. It was 11 years, and I think more than joy, the word you use, I think it's intrigue, isn't it? It's all intrigue with Jimmy Anderson. You've got guys retired from Test cricket who's kind of been retired from Test cricket, I suppose, who'd not even taken a list day wicket since 2019. It all, I don't know. I think it's an intrigue because we're all kind of wondering why he's still playing, and what he. Do you know what I mean? Like what you've got nothing left to prove. But equally, I've said fairly flippantly at the time, and I think maybe this is the truth. No, sorry, not the truth. I think I maybe meant this more seriously than I meant at the time. But I kind of thought that the 100 ball swing last year might almost have prolonged Anderson's career because, do you remember those quotes from Moeen Ali at the time saying, God, if Jimmy was eligible, if he was around, I'd pick Jimmy now.
Yeah, that's what Anderson spoke about that as well. Well, yeah, because the whole thing is he went. I was watching these balls swing around corners, going, I can do that. You want me to run up
Yeah.
and do that for 20 balls? No problem. And
This is the interesting thing now, isn't it? Like, it would have been. I was fully on board with him not. I've always thought the 100 has been confused with this because going back to day one when Shane Warne was London Spirits head coach and Andrew McDonald, for example, was Birmingham Phoenix's head coach. Like, what is this? Is this celebrity or is this Moneyball? And
yeah,
do you remember when Chris Gale and Nasith Malinga and were both in the first draft and neither were picked up? It's like, okay, so we're not. So this is not a. When you say it's all about attracting the kids, you kind of think Gale, Malinga, Warne, what a great way to go. However many years on from that, I was surprised but pleased that Anderson wasn't picked up in the original draft because I didn't think it would have been a great look if we're selecting someone who last played T20 cricket 2 years before the Brexit referendum. However, I don't think. However, I think it'd be really cool if he got a wildcard gig on the back of taking 20 wickets in the North Group, because actually,
I
fundamentally,
agree.
that is
I
what
actually
it's
agree with you
for.
entirely.
The trouble is, though, of course, you'll have a lot of players who would turn around rightly and say, "Whoa." So let's take Matt Taylor, for example, who I think had 27 wickets at the time of the wildcards last year in the Blast,
Yeah,
and didn't get a wildcard. Ended up with a one-game replacement gig at London Spirit, didn't play. So it is very easy to say 20 wickets in the North Group, he'll deserve it, which is true.
do you know what I'd say to Matt Taylor in that instance? I'd say take 700 Test wickets first.
No. That's why I say that. I think it's. I broadly. I think it's. If he takes 20 wickets in the Blast, that's exactly what it's there for. The wild card thing, and I dare say everyone wanted to pick Anderson in the draft, but probably thought, how do we do this? Like, we've got no idea what this
Well,
looks
this
like.
is the thing. His T20 record isn't actually very good. So I agree with you as well about the point of seeing Anderson get his wickets caught in the ring. Like, Anderson represents the beauty of cricket. He's not meant to represent the beast of it, where you're just like, oh my god, like Alex Lees has splaffed one to mid off, like brilliant, spliced one even, blimey. And you see Anderson's record, T20 record, averages 30 with the ball, econ 8.36. In terms of England's all-time leading wicket
I'm not
takers,
having econ.
no, econ's fine. In terms of his T20I record, again, average of 30, strike rate 23.4, which is bet he sneaks into one a spell. And when he's like the 21st highest wicket taker for England in T20I cricket still, and his record is like the second or third worst of that list, basically, because he bowls. I remember I made this mistake last year. We had Tamal Mills on, and I asked a really cat-candid question about why is Ollie Robinson good in white ball? Because he's bowling 80 mile an hour on a length, and all I ever get told is that just gets whacked. And kind of Anderson is the same-ish kind of genre, but then if he's able to make it work, if he's able to kind of take these wickets, get into the 100, that's a story. I like stories. That's exciting.
And genuinely, if the 100 balls do what they did last year,
Yeah.
James Anderson will hoop it, right? And that is the that is. I mean, it'd be weird if he didn't.
Yeah.
But I remember being at Lords to watch Dan Worrell bowl 10 dots in a row. I want to say Tom Curley Cadmore,
It was indeed. Yep.
and it was doing so much. And yeah, you kind of had the question that had to be asked at the time almost was, God, like, it'd be cool to see Anderson doing this. And here we are now, and he's doing it. And also fair play there. I mean, Lanks at 3 from 3.
What a lovely segue. What you get James Anderson back in the team. You start winning matches. So Lancashire, the only winless team in the country with the red ball in hand, but they stick on the red kit, and they're 3 from 3. So at the time of recording, Blast, there's so many games. Now you in your notes said this is a great advert for block cricket.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
What? Why? Why is it a great advert?
Because I don't think any Lancashire, for what it's worth, I would much rather go with you bring Anderson back in, you start winning games narrative over sack the coach and start winning games. Because I I genuinely do.
But it's neither. They're just playing. They've just got a
No, no,
different
no,
team playing a
no,
different
no, no.
version
Of
of the
course, of
sport.
course, of course. But it's such reactive, sort of like football style fandom, that isn't it? To go, oh, Benke's gone, so we win the games. That's not true. It's not how it works. I do genuinely think how it works is that you take this team out of this format where they cannot buy a win. They're getting on a coach. They're spending a week at a time in Northampton, and they drew with Derbyshire at home and dominated for most of the game. Like, they cannot buy a win. They're second bottom of the Championship. I mean, relegated last year, expected to come straight back up. With the same team, the captain's changed. The coach is now gone. Like, it's all going off, and nothing good is happening. But then you change format. 2 new overseas coaches. So Marcus Harris, poor bloke, he's scored 825 runs, hasn't won a game. They bring Chris Green come into Balfour's of offspin. So they bring Chris Green into Balfour's of offspin. They bring Ashton Turner in. They are 2 overseas. Everything shifts. You've got different faces. You've got different kits on. You've got different. You start at different time of the day. It's a different length. Jimmy Anderson comes back in. Yes, Stephen Croft's the coach. Keaton Jennings is the captain again. All of a sudden, he couldn't buy a win 3 weeks ago. It's all. There is something about the Championship, which is that they're long weeks. If you're not winning, it's another long week, and then it's another long week. And it's another long coach journey, and suddenly you've not won in 7, and half the season's done. Whereas the Blast, the Blast started last Thursday. We're sat here on Tuesday morning. Lancs have played 3 games already. They've won 3, and suddenly all is right with the world again. And
But
do you know what I mean?
Is everything right with the world again?
No, it's not. No, it's not.
It
But it's perception, right? And I remember speaking to Ed Barnard a couple of years ago when he was at Worcestershire, talking about it was in the context of the schedule, but as most of my cricket journalism career tends to be now. But Ed said to me, like, the hardest bit of the Blast is you could find yourself with 4 away games in a row over 6 days, and if you're doing 4 away games in a row for 6 days, you're not going home. You're just getting on the coach, and you're going from one ground to the next, to the next, to the next. And once you start losing, it's bloody hard to stop, because you might finish the game at 10:30 p.m. You might get on the coach at 11:30, drive on to your next away game. You don't really have time to process stuff. You're on the coach, you get there, you try and get whatever sleep you can. You wake up, there you go out into the field the next day. 4 games in, you've probably forgotten where you lost 3 days ago. But suddenly, but the competition can run away from you very, very quickly. And if you reverse that, Lancs have won 3 times in the space that would take them to get to a Championship game and get home for a Championship game. That's one game. And they're, knowing how the Blast works, they're 3 from 3. They probably need 8 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins from 14 to get through. They're suddenly on this completely different wave that they're riding, that one that they'd much rather stay on than the one that they've been stuck on for the last 2 months. And I do think, I don't think block cricket is perfect, but I do think this is the one, and absolutely it can go the other way around. Leicestershire hadn't lost a game, completely invincible, and suddenly they're 30 for 7 at Wantage Road, because it's different. It's completely different. Northampton's probably the best example of this. Their T20 side is completely unrecognisable from their Campo side.
I think great advert. I think advert's the wrong word. I think it's a great showcase or example.
Broadly means. So I didn't mean this is what I didn't mean advertising. This is why we should do it. I thought this is a great advert for what block cricket can do. I suppose.
I feel like I'm happy. I'm back on board now. I feel like advert means because hey, Lancashire fans, good news. All you needed for a change in fortunes was to change the sport you're playing, change the players, change the captain, change the coach, change the colour you get.
But it is true. I think the Northampton example actually is probably starker, because their Blast team on paper versus the Championship team on paper, they are much stronger, at least on at least name wise, in the Blast. Papara comes in, David Willey comes in, Bretsky comes in, George Grimshaw's in, and suddenly that team, from a side that was really struggled under Dan Lehman in the Championship, much younger side, young batting lineup, struggling for runs. You go from that to having a side that's got blokes who know this format like the back of their hand.
Yeah.
They were really good last year. Without the ludicrous 5-week break between group stage and quarterfinals, they might well have got themselves to finals day. So I stand by the thesis, if not the wording.
All right, I'm with you. I don't know. I sometimes just get a bit. One of the many times, it's one of the many times I get sad about cricket is when you just see, you're like, oh, cool, brilliant. So it's just a completely different team, and I lose the narrative. We got to move on, Nick. We got to move on.
Let me throw a question at you then. Like,
All right.
if we take the time that the time it's taken for Lancs to win three Blast games, if we call that one champ a game, with where they were at in the championship, do you think if that was an 8th championship game rather than 3 Blast games, Lancs would have won?
No, because it's completely different.
I'm not talking sport. I was talking like actual mindset. Like, do you know what I mean? Like you're in a hole. It would not at all surprise me if Lancs came out of these Blast games in 2 weeks' time, play these 2 rounds
and then win their county game.
And won them both. 100%.
Okay.
Momentum is a massive thing with this. Like,
that's
as
fine.
much as I think it's a nonsense in most sporting.
I'm happy to agree with you. I'm just not sold on how salient or kind of deep a point it is to go, when everything changes, things change. Anyway,
but I think they required everything to change for things to change, if that makes sense. I'm not sure they would have changed
without everything changing.
Organically.
There we go. That's a one big circle we've gone in. Anyway, the cricket draft. James Anderson, get him in. It's the fun option. I also want to throw another name towards you, Nick, because you wrote a piece on him recently. James Coles, I believe you said he was a lovely cricketer and he started the season very well for Sussex.
He started the season all right. He's better than what he's done.
What do you mean?
In Division 1. Oh, sorry, you meant the Blast season. He started the Blast season brilliantly.
That's why I mentioned it, because we're talking about the cricket draft for the Blast.
I thought you meant the season, which started in April.
The
campaign, the Blast campaign. James Coles is great. Yeah, like he's 21. He's played 100 first-team games. He's been on multiple Lions tours, turned down franchise stuff over the winter in the Big Bash just to stay with the Lions. And of course, my favourite bit, he played in the Hong Kong Sixes over the winter as well. So he must be good. He's played for England in the Hong Kong Sixes. No, he's really talented. He bowls increasingly mature white ball left arm spin, I'd say, and he is a really, really nice batter to watch. He belted 80 odd off 40 balls, and he also hit a shot at Lords against Middlesex in that first night. I swear you never see at Lords. He hit a really big 6 over long on towards the media centre end, which in my head is just like one of those areas that doesn't often get cleared. Do you know what I mean? I always feel like Lords straight is big, right? And it was just an unusual to take the old Adil Rashid. Like, it was an unusual area to be accessed. Long on. Excellent. Not that unusual, but I didn't feel like I'd seen much of it. He's good. He's really good.
Well, on the topic of players on the periphery of the England side, here we go. Not another fantastic segue. The England Lions, they had a game at Canterbury this week against India. To conclude, runs everywhere. Both teams got north of 500, and then on day 4, a friend of mine went to day 4, went all the way down to Canterbury.
I nearly went to day 4.
I'm glad you nearly went.
I actually forgot to go on day 4.
That's better. But anyway, what did we learn? So it's kind of 500 apiece, then 250 for 2 on the final day for India A. And I think the main two...
It would have been a really interesting 9th day.
Good point. Correct. I think the main 2 names I want to pick out are 2 batters, and that's Tom Haynes and Max Holden. We're going to start with Tom Haynes because he has kind of weirdly been very under the radar throughout his career, and he's now having what I refer to as the Son Heung-min effect, where everyone says he's underrated, so he therefore becomes as rated as he should be because people just go like, people don't appreciate how good a player he is. He averages 40 in first-class cricket. He's got 15 first-class tons, multiple Lions tons. But within this conversation, in terms of next cab off the rank for England opener, it very much goes Ben McKinney first, then Tom Haynes. Why do you think that is? And I've got a theory, which I'm going to say.
I think he's a really interesting kind of under the radar in that I know I wrote those words for you, but I suggested those words to you. He's an interesting kind of under the radar because everyone's known he scored all these runs at Sussex, right? But they were all in Division 2, and they were all, I think, more important.
They're in Div 2 under 15s,
more importantly in Division 2, they were in a very weak team, and he was like and they were a very young team, and as young as he wasn't one of the youngsters, if that makes sense. And I think because he wasn't one of the kids in that side, you almost just become labelled as like the county guy, if that makes sense. I don't think he was. I think it was very hard to get selected for England out of that team that's losing every week, regardless of your numbers, if you weren't one of the 16-year-old kids, because you're not the fun bit of the story, and the rest of the story is pretty bleak. And I thought he did this will sound mad because they hardly won a game. I thought he did a really, really good job, first as captain, then as senior batter, and a good job on an individual basis, because that was a really tricky team to come out of with any credit, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm with
Because
you.
you're losing every week. The fun bit is that they fielded the youngest ever championship team, and can they win a game with these kids and stuff? But the reality, if we're being brutally honest, is that James Cole's, which you touched on before, has done really well for himself, and you're never going to have a 100% hit rate with 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds when you blood them as they were. But some of those guys, Archie Lenham, I think he's in the last year of his contract, Dan Ibrahim as well, who were like the two early movers, weren't they? Youngest, one of the youngest players in the Blast, and in Lenham, if not the youngest, I can't quite remember. Dan Ibrahim got 50 on debut, I think, in the Championship. And all the talks about those guys, and Tom Haines is just almost like the designated adult to sort of try and score the runs, and I suppose like keep his own head above water. Like his career, I think to have done what he's done, particularly in that period, which then I think obviously held him a very good stead when they became stronger as a side, was a really impressive effort. And I'm pleased he's getting noticed in this context more. He was always noticed as someone who scored runs in the Championship. But even, for example, when he was opening the batting with Ali Orr was the one who went to Hampshire and was talked about, and Haynes was the very reliable opener who's going to score you the runs, but maybe not as excitingly, if that's a word, as Orr. But yeah, I think 15 tons at his age, which is mid-20s, is a seriously proper effort, given that context as well.
Do you want my
yes
abbreviated theory, which isn't entirely thought through, but I like it? Gets hit in the head. That's why. So this year, and perception is reality, he's been sconned by both Gus Atkinson and Josh Tongue this year. So there's an idea of like, if the pace goes up with Sussex going up to Div 1, like what happens when he faces raw pace? And unfortunately, in my head, this is how all changing rooms works. If you get hit in the head by the England bowlers, they then go back to whatever changing room they're in, and they go, "Hey, old Hainsey in the face," and then you get, that's just the kind of talk that then surrounds you. And Ben McKinney's 6'7", so it's harder to hit him in the head because his head's higher off the ground. And I think you need to think about these things.
Speaks volumes of Ben Duckett, that, doesn't it?
Exactly. Ben Duckett's kind of so close to the ground and always manages to avoid it. It'll be interesting. I don't think Haynes has overtaken McKinney in this.
No, but I would also say that
I think McKinney is a bit of a golden boy at the moment.
But I think it's a broader point on the Lion stuff, that if two teams score 500, you kind of can't win and you kind of can't lose. Yeah. But what you can do is, so George Hill's a good example of this, and that he was picked in the Lions, then pulled out because he played all 7 games for Yorkshire, and they're resting him. And look, probably for the best, given that you'd bowl about 5 million overs on that pitch. But the reality is, for George Hill, that's the first Lions call up, and that is a tick in the box. That is sign of progress. You've been selected. They've noticed you. You're on the radar. For Tom Haines, Dan Mosley, and Max Holden, you get into that squad. You get a game. You each score 100. If it's that flat that everyone gets 100, and it's 500 plays 500, you shouldn't on that alone jump the queue. But what you should do but what you should have done by doing that is justified your inclusion and told the selectors they're on the right lines with you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think you mentioned Max Holden there, and he is the person where we were talking about kind of pecking orders and whatever. He really seems to have advanced his case over the winter and this summer. Even before it was after his first century of the season on the opening day, I was down at Sussex for an event, and Luke Wright was speaking and name-checked him. And that was one of many times that Holden has been name-checked in terms of being this player who is proactively mentioned. And over the winter, it was Holden, it was Josh Tongue, it was Ben McKinney, and it was Sam Cook. Those were the 4 that basically Key or Wright, if you left them to their own devices, would give a mention to. Maybe Max Holden a little bit later. And I was looking up his kind of career record ahead of this, And it's so strange. And I got really confused because I associate Max Holden with scoring so many runs of late. And he does. He averages 50 in the last 2 seasons. He scored 5 centuries. He had a very good ILT20 cameo over the winter. But he had a 6-year gap between first-class tons between 2018 and 2024. His career average is just a tick above 30. Where have these runs come from? What has changed? As you wrote in the notes, officially gun status now? Question mark. Like, has 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 the leap been made? Where has this Max Holden been hiding over the last 6 years that he's only appeared in the last 2?
Oh, if you go back to this, go back 6, 7 years ago, they called him like they said he was like little like mini Alistair Cook, but mainly because he was left-handed and back with Gray Nichols.
I'll do it.
I'm probably slightly biased. I really like Max, and I'm chuffed for him because he did all the jobs, and like it was funny. I remembered him as this. I interviewed him at the start of the season. And we talked about. I said obviously, he's done brilliantly at number 3 for Middlesex, and I said to him, obviously Kane Williamson comes in at the end of May. Presumably he'll want to bat 3, or presumably he will be batting 3. Where would you rather bat? Would you rather go up or down? And he would, I think at the time he said he said he was like very comfortable now in the middle order, but he sat on the fence. I'm very comfortable now in the middle order, but equally I'm in a much better place now to bat at the top. And I actually hadn't realised at the time how long ago it was that he was last open the batting. So of course they had Stoneman and Robson together for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So it's been a long old time since he did open. He's now opening again because a lot of their batters have got runs individually at different points of the season. They've had a few injuries, and suddenly Max has found himself opening the championship because of circumstance, basically. And I suspect that's where he'll be. And also because he said he asked to, basically, because I think in mid-May when it became apparent that Kane would come in and probably bat 3, then it was almost like, well, I might as well give this a go now. Ironically, he's not scored a run since he went to the top. But I think anyone who's watched Max Holden over any period of time would tell you they knew he was talented enough to do this. And it's probably a decent argument for the people who say, as the people who say, or the vast majority of people who would all say the same thing, which is that batters get better with experience, and he's experienced struggling. And I think his first 100 of the season was his second non-Kookaburra century ever in first class cricket. So even the hundreds last year, or at least sorry, his second in 6 years. His first 100 last year was with the Kookaburra ball at Wantage Road, and then he got another one at some point in the season. I can't remember when with the Dukes, but it has been like a sharp rise within a very slow rise. He played in the 19s. He did really well on loan at Northants as a teenager. But anyone who you ask about Max Holden will say that they always knew he had this in him. It's not a surprise. It's just taking a bit of time to come out. And so I'm really pleased with him that it has done because he's worked bloody hard at it, I think.
Tiny bit more admin to clean up from the England Lions game. So along with Tom Haynes and Max Holden, who both made centuries, Dan Mousley beat Jacob Bethel to the title of maiden first-class century. The two England players who kind of have been promoted.
They're mates as well. They're mates, and
they're old, very, very.
And there's a lovely little anecdote about Mosley's, because Mosley's previous high score I think was 94, and it ended with him being caught long on. And lovely. I've interviewed him twice, and the first time was just after that. He said, "I don't regret it. It was the situation of the game. It was the right shot to play." And I interviewed him at the start of this season, a couple of years on, and said, "Do you still not regret it?"
Yeah.
And he couldn't say no. He said, I wish it had gone. I wish it had gone."
Perfect.
So he's there now.
Also, just kind of, as this is topic 3.5, we're almost going to just kind of drive by it and just notice it. June the 1st has passed now, which means the transfer window in cricket. Basically, if you're in your last year of your county contract, you are now free to be tapped up and have conversations with other counties.
Free to be tapped up.
There we go.
That's how the PCA like to put it.
I don't know. They're not here. No one's that. PCA.
The tapping up window is now open.
And from that England game, Zoom Akhtar and Ajit Singh Dale out of contract this summer. I imagine A, that Gloucestershire will be very keen to keep them, and I imagine B, that a lot of other teams will be keen to nab them. They're two of the quicker bowlers on the circuit. Casey Aldridge, another recent kind of England line and bit of a superstar down at Somerset, out of contract as well, as is Shoaib Bashir. And the BBC and a number of parties reported that basically Bashir's open to leaving Somerset because he wants to get game time. I don't think that's a surprise for anyone, really. I also don't think it's a particular surprise that Somerset would let him go because he's the
No,
third
I
choice
think
spinner there.
it's the best. It's the best case scenario for everyone. I think everyone has worked.
Yeah.
I actually think everyone's worked very maturely over the last couple of years to try and make it work as best for everyone as they can. You couldn't blame Somerset. It's not like they've taken some weird gamble on someone ahead of Bashir. They've picked Jack Leach, and you can't blame Bashir for wanting to play games. So,
Yeah. Everyone's played their role there. That's fine.
and also, of course, Somerset done a. Bear in mind, without Somerset, Bashir would never have played for England in the first place. So, it's been, they took the chance on him in the first place.
Yeah,
When
that's
he
true.
was.
Yeah.
So it's worked as a move, and it's run its. Yeah, it feels like it's run its course, doesn't it? Like,
It's interesting that in terms of the list of potential suitors, I think what I've seen reported in a few places, Surrey is one of them. There's a chance he might head home because they are genuinely the team that's kind of lacking a frontline spinner at the moment. So that could be a nice storyline as such. But that is everything for this week. The County Conversation podcast is sponsored by Daffabet, the world's leading online betting site. To find out more, visit daffabet.com. I've been Cameron Ponsonby. Thanks very much to Nick Friend as ever, and we'll see you and speak to you again next week.